Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. Again, it is the end of a month, so it's time for a freeform, and today I'm going to talk about Tuits and spoons. I can already hear some of you. Did I just drop into a parallel universe where what you're saying is supposed to make sense? Yes. So, a tuit. It's spelled T-U-I-T. It's best if it's circular. The square ones, the rectangular ones just don't seem to work very well. And people ask for this all the time. You say, when are you going to be able to do this? And they'll say, well, when I get around to it. That's why it needs to be circular. It's a bit of a joke, obviously, but it's something that I've actually seen on more than one feature request form or bug report. Is how many tuits is this going to take? Is it going to take nothing? Is it a trivial fix? Is it a minor thing? It only requires a few tuits, requires more tuits, or it requires all the tuits because it's a major revision or an entirely new feature that's being requested. So it is a measurement that's out there. And spoons, well, spoons comes from an example that was given by somebody who's trying to explain what it was like living with a disability. And the example they had was you get a fixed number of spoons per day. That's your total amount of energy. And the tasks that you have to do use up your spoons, whether that is getting dressed in the morning or whether that's having a shower or a bath or something like that. And there's a fixed number of spoons was the main point there. So I've heard lots of people referring to spoons as shorthand for, do you have the energy for this? Can you think about it? Can you deal with this right now? And they'll say, I'm out of spoons. Or they'll just say, I don't have enough spoons to deal with this at the time. Okay. And you say, I understand what you're getting at, and we'll move on and come back to it hopefully when you have more energy. But why am I talking about these things right now? Well, what I'm intending to talk about relates to both of these measurements, because in both cases, what we're trying to measure is how much effort is it going to require to do a particular task. And this, for me, has lately come into play with all the various projects and other tasks that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I ended up listing them all out because I couldn't keep track of it anymore. So I ended up listing them all out, and then I organized them by how many tuits it required. Since that's not something that everybody understands, I've also explained it as how many spoons does it require, or a more general way of referring to that would be how much focus, how much concentrated focus does a particular task require. Some things are very easy. You know, I can knock that off. I can do 3 of these little project tasks in a day. It's not a big deal. But then there's the stuff that requires a moderate amount of tuits. That's going to require somewhere between 2 to 4 hours of actual focus, like uninterrupted focus. And then there's the stuff that requires all the tuits, is what I wrote down. It may not be all the tuits, but it requires a lot of them. And you go, well, what kinds of things are that? Well, here's a payroll system that has a 238-page installation manual. That requires a lot of time because there's a lot of prerequisites, there's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of gotchas, there's a lot of research and study that needs to be done to make sure that this is implemented in a correct fashion that isn't going to lose data. Losing payroll data is usually a bad thing. People don't like that. And we don't want it corrupted. We don't want to get halfway there and then realize we've overlooked something and have to restart the whole project from scratch. Even worse, we don't want to be using it for 4 months and then realize that because of the way it was done, now we can't do some big thing that, like, run year-end taxes or something like that. Or worse, it's going to be extremely difficult. So when you have large projects like that, where you're making big changes on complex topics that require a lot of research, that can require a lot of time. I have done some projects that required, 50, 60 hours worth of work just for the first phase. And by the time I got through the second or the third phase, it totted up to something more like 120 hours of work. If you think about a general work week being like 40 hours of full-time work, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's 3 solid weeks on a single project, straight, during which time there was no assistance with anything else. There were no emergencies that I had to deal with. There was nothing else. It was just one project. Now, in the real world, that's not how that happens. You have emergencies come up, you have other things come up that you have to deal with. You need to take a detour to have a meeting, update people with what you're working on, or talk to colleagues who need assistance. These are things that all need to happen, and that's expected. So, in actual fact, 3 weeks of concentrated work ends up being even more than 3 weeks, because there's all the things that happen in the meantime. Anyway, the reason I documented all of this in the last week was because I could not manage all of those tasks on my own. There's over 20 of them. And I have to sit down with a few people, project manager, help desk manager, COO of my company, a few different people, and go, these are the things that I am currently tasked with, but I've been spending a lot of time on the day-to-day, on the things that are immediate. If something gets pushed up and says, this is actually a real priority, this needs to get done right now, that's fine. I understand that happens. But in the meantime, I can't move forward on some of these other bigger projects because I need the chunks of time to come not as 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there is barely enough for me to even remember what I was last looking at. And by the time the next emergency comes up, great, now I remember what I was working on, and I can't work on it anymore. I have to go off and do this. If we're going back to the spoons analogy, every time I have to switch a task, I fumble and I just dropped a spoon. Now I only have these left. Every time I switch a task, now I want to go back to it. Okay, that's going to drop another spoon. I'm going to run out of spoons really quickly if I keep doing that. So for some projects, I need some other people to, in effect, run interference for me. Or at least say, hey, I know this looks urgent, but we kind of need to make sure we set enough time aside so that other projects get worked on. In some cases, some projects have been waiting for me to even start them for over a year. Now, clearly they're not critical projects. Fine. But if I keep putting them off because other things keep getting prioritized above it, it's not going to get done at all, which is not what we want. So that's why I had to list everything out, and then I kind of need, I need to find like 4 hours somewhere where we're going to try not to have phones ringing, or we're going to try to, make sure that we're creating a gap, essentially, where we can slot something in and actually have some uninterrupted time working on it. Because some of this stuff takes days of effort. If I have to go through 238 pages of installation manual, it's going to take days. And then I actually have to go and install the system and tick all the boxes. And if there's anything that comes up during that needs to be troubleshooted, now I need to make time to phone up the vendor, call them, talk to them, figure out what's going on, get a fix, implement the fix. All of this stuff takes time, and lots of it. So, yeah. Now I'm organizing things by Tuits, or spoons, or just a general measure of how much concentrated focus does this require in order to get it done. To some extent, you could also look at this as just scheduling. But as a net admin, I'm kind of in a bit of a unique place in that if we look at project management directly, like our project manager says, hey, I've got 2 or 3 people that are working on projects, and he's scheduling them. He knows what they're working on. If they need extra time for something, cool, that's fine. He can juggle all the other projects, and that's fine. Where it's different for me specifically is I'm kind of working across several different departments. I might be helping with the day-to-day for a big emergency. I might be planning or analyzing a network and working with that. I might be working on various projects under project management. I may also be working with help desk on setting up new standards or setting up new tools that help desk needs in order to work on that. There's a lot of separate areas that require time and attention. And so rather than just having my head explode, that's why I went, okay, I need to sit down and actually plan this out with some people, because all of these items are important, but I only have so much time and attention. And if it's chopped up into, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, maybe I get a whole hour. Okay, that might be sufficient time, an hour, to do some of the low impact tasks. But it's nowhere near enough time to be able to devote to writing a script to automate the moving of 150 different folders with permissions and ownership and everything else that attached to it. It might not be enough to read through more than a few pages of a massive installation manual. It might not be enough to start working on regenerating a bunch of boot media. There's a lot of big tasks that require more focus than having it chopped up into little chunks. So there you go. Now, what is something that other people can take from this? If you need help scheduling things out, talk to somebody about it. If you are responsible for a large project and you're continuously having to deal with other things that pop up as emergencies or priorities, again, to some extent, you might just have to deal with that. I don't have the luxury of I'm going to spend 5 hours on this one thing. I don't care if a server went down. I don't care if people can't email. This is not my problem. I'm working on this little thing. I cannot afford to be tunnel visioned to that extent. And it would be unreasonable to try to do that. So to some extent, you're going to have other true emergencies or other true priorities pop up and have to take precedence. But what you can do, hopefully, is go to somebody and say, I need to try and find some time to work on X. And I think I might need like a block of 2 hours or 3 hours. Or if it's something more extended, you might go, I need to see if I can, maybe set my afternoons aside for this for like a week. I'll deal with all the emergency and priority stuff in the morning that's come in overnight, but then I need to make sure that I have like 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. for the next week set aside to look at this. Is there a way that we can make that work? And if you get a request like that, you being the scheduler in this case, I would also encourage you to take a solid look at that. There is a cost to context switching that even if you drop something really quickly to switch to a problem and fix it within half an hour or whatever, it's going to take a little bit of time to go, okay, now what was I looking at before? It's normal for this to be a normal, it's a normal cost in human computing, if I can use that phrase here. So having the ability to have some uninterrupted blocks of time for focused effort is a really helpful thing to have, if you can provide it. Again, with the understanding that things are going to happen and there's not a whole lot you can do about it other than just do your best to deal with it and then get back to what you were working on before. Maybe sometimes this ends up with you going, this has completely ruined my entire afternoon because I was going to have 3 hours of time to work on this, and this emergency just took up 2.5 hours, and now I don't have enough time to really sink my teeth into what I was dealing with. That might happen. That's absolutely something that might happen. But do what you can, and if you have something like that come up, you can go back to people and say, yeah, I kind of lost a block of time because I was dealing with this. So I'm going to have to work on that. You work for a week and you say, okay, I'm like 70% of the way there, but I need a little extra time. So long as you're actually making progress and so long as you actually deliver something at the end of it, hopefully most companies will be okay with that. There are some companies I know that are much more demanding. You have 2 hours to do this. If you don't have it done within 2 hours, then to the moon. That's not as helpful, honestly, to deal with. Whether you're working as a system admin, a network admin, or anybody else, in any position, that kind of inflexibility is not really helpful. It's not good. But conversely, you can't expect to say, oh yes, this project is at 90% complete, and another week goes by, oh yeah, it's still at 90% complete, and another week goes by, oh yeah, it's still at 90% complete. Your supervisor, your boss, is going to come to you and say, what have you got to show for all this time that you're putting in? If your only answer is, well, I have something, but only I can use it because it's still unfinished, eventually they're going to say, show us the goods. You have to come up with something that is a tangible result of the time you've put in, of the effort that has been put in, of the investment, if you will, that the company has made in giving you the time to work on it. You have to have something to show for it. So it's not a license to go and spend your time doing whatever you like, obviously, and you have to stay focused on what you're actually trying to accomplish. But hopefully they will allow you that flexibility to work it out. Find the blocks of time necessary to let you actually put the effort in. They will give you enough Tuits so that you can actually do the work, or enough spoons, or enough time for you to get the spoons to get it. There, however you want to refer to it. I can mix my metaphors all day. But however you want to refer to it, this kind of balancing is one of the things that you have to do as a network admin, or really anybody else that has projects or multiple tasks to balance. And so learning to deal with it is a good thing. But that's all I'm going to talk about for now in today's Freeform. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door net admin. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for things you'd like me to talk about, feel free to leave those down in the comments. And otherwise, we'll see you later.